Hey there. It's been a while since I filmed a video, and I know I've been talking a lot in posts lately about some reasons why we may experience a plateau in trauma therapy. And so I want to cover 3 reasons why that may be happening today. I'm going to skip over the first 2 pretty quickly, and I want to spend the most time on the third one, which I think is the most important one for now. So the first reason are internal factors. So these are things like our own personal motivation, our consistency, that sort of like the effort that we're putting into the therapeutic process. So of course it makes sense that if we don't feel super motivated to attend therapy or to do the work that change requires, we probably won't get the best outcomes possible, and that's okay. Similarly, if it's just not a good time in our lives for therapy and it's really hard to make it consistently to appointments, that can certainly affect how fast or how well you feel like you're making progress. The second factor are relationship factors. So there's been extensive research that shows that the quality of the client-therapist relationship has a really big impact on how you will do in therapy, on your clinical outcomes. And so if you don't have a great relationship with your therapist, maybe you feel like you just don't really jive that well with them, or maybe you feel like they judge you a little bit, or that they don't really fully understand you, that can certainly have an effect on the progress that you make. And so the third reason why you might be experiencing a plateau in trauma therapy lies in the modality that your therapist is using. And so for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be using the term talk therapy. And what I mean when I say talk therapy are modalities like cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, even trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, any kind of narrative therapy where the bulk of the therapy session is spent talking about the trauma. And so these are great modalities. I will say that there's a lot of research behind these, and we actually use them in our practice here in both individual and group settings. However, when treating trauma, they have some serious limitations. So they can get us so far, but usually what happens over time is that people feel like they're sort of stuck. They've sort of hit a plateau when they're using these modalities to process trauma. And we see it all the time. We have clients who say, you know, I feel like I've processed this, or maybe I know cognitively that the trauma wasn't my fault, or you know, I've done really good work in terms of like my thinking about it, but I just feel stuck still. I just like feel like it was still my fault. I feel like I haven't overcome it yet. And that's an indication that you've probably done a lot of really good cognitive work, but the trauma might still be stuck in your body, really. And we know that trauma gets stored in a really unique way, in that it's stored in our thinking brains, or our prefrontal cortex. So of course we have thoughts about the trauma, and these modalities really target that part of our brain. They really ask you to look at the trauma in a different way, to think about it in a different way, maybe to challenge your thoughts about the trauma and to say it out loud, which are very thinking-oriented tasks. But the other part of our brains that trauma gets stored in is our limbic system. This is sort of like our fight, flight, freeze response, our feeling brains. And so those modalities can be really helpful with that first part of our brain, but they really are limited in that they don't access trauma being stored in our bodies in a way that other sort of somatic or sensory modalities would. And so I'm going to give you a quick example of this. It's sort of like if you are driving down the freeway, and this has probably happened to all of us, where something from the road, maybe a piece of a tire, comes flying up and hits our windshield, right? And so we might be driving and having a lovely little day, and then the tire comes and starts flying toward us, toward our face, and it's going to hit the windshield. Well, what do we do in response to that? Typically, we might do that, right? So we might take our hands off the wheel, we might cover our face, we might look away, look down at the floor, we might shield ourselves. And that's not a thinking brain response, right? That's a very survival-oriented reflex, and it's designed to keep us safe. So logically, we could logic our way through that till the cows come home, right? We could say, logically, I know that there's a windshield there to protect me. I knew that the tire was not going to hit my face. This has happened, 50 times before in my life, and I've never been injured as a result of this happening. I could even say it probably made me in more danger to look away from the road and to take my hands off the steering wheel. That probably led to more danger than if I had just remained 10 and 2 and kept it moving, right? So you can see how if I'm processing something like that, I might come into therapy, I might say, logically this makes sense. I totally get it. It's next time I'm gonna keep my hands on the wheel. I don't want to put myself in more danger. And really challenge our thinking around that and impart logic with that. And what's going to happen when I leave the office and get in my car and drive home, and it happens again, I'm gonna, all that cognitive stuff is gonna totally go out the window, right? I'm gonna do that again probably, because that's it's not a totally cognitive thing. So while the cognitive approach may be really useful, it will have its limitations in that it doesn't access the way that trauma is stored in our bodies. And so that's kind of an example of how that process works. So with trauma memories, they're different from other memories. So, for example, the memory of what I ate for breakfast yesterday is stored in my thinking brain. It's stored only in my cognitive brain. I know that it was probably Frosted Flakes, which isn't the best, but they're delicious. So that's in my thinking brain, right? That's not stored somatically. It's not stored in my body because it wasn't traumatizing. Versus a trauma memory, again, it's stored in my thinking brain, but also in my body. And so we have to use a modality that targets and accesses the way that trauma is stored in our cellular level, at a cellular level. So there are modalities out there. This is the good news is that this isn't a new concept. Therapists have known this for a long time. And so there are modalities like EMDR, somatic experiencing, brain spotting, trauma releasing exercises. So there are several modalities that do address trauma holistically. And so I encourage you, when you're thinking about starting trauma therapy, that you look into a therapist who might be trained in these more somatic approaches, so that you can experience sort of a comprehensive approach to healing from your trauma. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, Bessel van der Kolk, who is a trauma expert, wrote a book about this. It's called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's all about how trauma is stored in our cells. And so I definitely recommend that book if you want to learn more about this. I hope this is a helpful explanation, and feel free to send me a message if you want to chat about this concept further. Thanks. Take care. Bye.